Welcome to the Powerhouse Physio Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Lowe, a rowing specialist physical therapist. The Powerhouse Physio Podcast is a space for all of us to keep learning from each other, to keep us rowing and performing at our best. I hope you enjoy these conversations as much as I do and that you keep coming back for more. Welcome to the first ever Powerhouse Physio Podcast episode. I was very fortunate to be joined by my friend Emily Granger. She is the athletic trainer for the Northeastern women's rowing team in Boston, Massachusetts. She and I have known each other for a long time. We've done a lot of work together and just wanted to share some of what we've learned, hoping that it can be helpful for others. All right, so welcome to the very first ever episode of the Powerhouse Physio Podcast. I'm super excited to be starting this. I have the pleasure of talking with a lot of really awesome people in the rowing world all the time. So sort of per suggestion of a coworker and just because why not? I decided it'd be fun to start recording them and sharing them in case it can be helpful for other people. So the first guest is Emily Granger, an athletic trainer from Northeastern University's women's rowing team. She and I have known each other for a few years now, and the cool thing is Emily is a non-rower working in the rowing space, and she and I have come to really be able to collaborate with each other and learn from each other because of, the learning we've been able to do together and sort of what she's been up to with her team. I would say a really neat thing for kind of Emily within the rowing community is she sort of has a unique setup in that her athletes and coaches like really truly trust her and come to her with their injuries and their this and their that and kind of are able to mitigate things like really quickly. And, their athletes don't feel like they need to hide anything from her because she knows what she's doing. And I would say, sadly, that's a really uncommon relationship between athletic trainers and rowing teams. So props to Emily and all the hard work she's done to be able to create that relationship. And truly, she's our relationship and our development of kind of knowledge and collaboration together is a really big inspiration behind the keys to working with rowers that I've built. So hopefully this conversation just kind of teaches all of us a little bit more and we can get to know Emily and the cool stuff she's doing over at Northeastern. So yeah, Emily, I would say, kind of that's how we've gotten to know each other. But
Yep.
But what's your kind of take, I guess, on your last few years on the Northeastern women's rowing team?
Yeah, so I would say I started working at Northeastern and I was assigned women's rowing. It is a sport that is very different from every other field sport. Like we learn about hamstring strains and ACL injuries and the typical injuries that we learn about that are common in field sports and court sports and things like that. But when it came to rowing, the injuries are very, very different. They don't really translate as directly as a basketball to a soccer. So I found myself kind of stuck as a new I was maybe 3 or 4 years of experience, but generally new working with rowing, and didn't really have that knowledge base of what rowing injuries were, what rowing really was. Like my first year, I didn't see rowing on the water until we went to spring break training trip. So I was managing all of these injuries, but I didn't really truly know what the sport was about. So I found myself just needing more resources. Like the first athlete that came to me with a rib stress injury, I was like, what are you talking about? Why do your ribs hurt? You don't play football. You don't play lacrosse. You didn't get an impact to your ribs. This doesn't make sense to me. So mainly me and Lisa connected because I was really looking for resources on how to help support myself and help support these athletes with a better understanding of rowing. Kind of do a little bit of research online, but there's not a whole lot out there, especially for athletic trainers, which is kind of where Lisa got that idea to come up with her intro to rowing basics. And it's been very helpful for me just to build that knowledge base to be able to better treat these athletes.
Yeah, and I would say something I, probably didn't expect. How many years in are we now? Like 4 or 5?
I think about 4, yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like I didn't necessarily expect like from my end sort of how much I would get to learn from, what you've gathered and experienced and everything within a, collegiate team because I've never had the opportunity to be on your side of things, right? Like I've never
Yep.
had the challenge of managing like 60 women's rowers all at the same time, right? I get the one-offs and collection of multiple different age groups and genders and all that kind of stuff. So
Yep.
I feel like it's really opened my eyes to the true challenges of a collegiate environment, both from an athletic training side and really like in some ways our conversations over sort of how your guys' strength coaches integrate and all that kind of stuff has taught me a lot of like, wow, these professionals have a really hard job that like typically you don't know the sport. You're thrown all these athletes who are doing an incredibly high workload
Yep.
and like that how do you help them if you don't understand even just like the basic like how do people move and where do these injuries come from and like all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So it's been really cool to be able to like learn alongside of each other and kind of I feel like especially as my in-person practice has grown with the rowers that I get to work with, the fact that typically you and I see a lot of common trends of
Yep.
injuries through the year. And part of that's because we're experiencing the same weather, right?
Yep.
All of the rowers that we treat are rowing in the same conditions. But it's been like really affirming of like, oh, okay, yeah, she sees this too. So like I'm not crazy. Like we are seeing more of this thing this year. And
Yep.
so I feel like it's been a really nice other just like within our Boston area connection to start to recognize some trends and patterns and whether it is because it's been like a cold year or a windy year or a rainy season or whatever it is, like we've both noticed how much that really affects the injury trends that we have.
Yep. Absolutely.
And yeah, and I feel like that's just like I wouldn't have had that chance if you don't have like the bulk of athletes that you have that you're working with, and then like 95% of my time is with rowers, right? So it's like
Mhm.
the two together, it's yeah, it's been really cool. Um, so yeah, I'd say between those things, like it's been such a fun experience to get to learn from each other. And then probably the most fun that we've had is for the past 4 years, every fall, we've like batch sort of like tested slash like I don't know, what do you call it on your end for like the testing that we do?
Kind of like baseline testing almost, like
Yeah.
just a data collection with
Yeah,
the
yeah,
rowers.
and right, and like with the goal for the athletes of like, okay, here's like kind of some numbers for you. Here's some stuff we can maybe work on for the coaches. It's a nice chance for them to sort of gauge like where the team is at for the fall. So we sort of developed in parallel with so Champion PT where I work has a really strong relationship with the baseball team at Northeastern. Um, we have a dog entry. And um so I feel like we had the chance to kind of be like, all right, these baseball guys get to come in and do all of this, so like why can't we do this too?
Yep.
And so they, use it as their spring or their preseason like screening for, shoulder stuff to prevent like elbow shoulder injuries. They just do their pitchers. We don't have just a one position that's more apt to be injured than others, like baseball. So it's like, well, we got to do the whole team.
Right.
Which then goes from it being what, like maybe 20 or 30 pitchers to like 60 women,
60.
right? So it's like the logistic of like how on earth do we test this many people in a like relatively time efficient way
Right.
was like a huge thing. And thanks to like coworkers of mine who are willing to step up and participate and like make it so we have all hands on deck. Um, so I guess let's take a step back. Let's like describe sort of the testing that we've done, like the different actual um sorry, my dog's drinking water.
That's
Um
okay.
the actual things that we've found that we've started with testing and sort of I feel like now that we've been 4 years in, we've really started to get a bit of like trends and we had a conversation last week to kind of decide like, okay, is this the format we want to continue with going forward?
Right.
Sort of reflecting in that space, but still I feel like we've learned a lot from what we've done so far. Um,
Yeah. So I think like to start is where like the testing battery and how we developed that. Like so we started with hip range of motion, because that's important to be able to get into the different positions of the rowing stroke. Like you need a certain amount of hip flexion in order to get into the correct catch position. And then we did hip strength, as just kind of a measure of overall pelvic stability. And we did the shoulder strengthening, which was a similar battery to what baseball does, but just overall rotator cuff testing. Then we did ankle dorsiflexion, because that's
Range
needed
of
to get into
motion.
the catch position as well. And then grip strength. And then a last component that we added, which was more of kind of a subjective rather than objective measure, was the Lisa basically evaluated everyone on their hinge pattern. So all that information we kind of took from research articles on whether it was important or not. Some of it was from our experience on what we found important. And then we kind of have developed that battery of testing to include, or to get rid of, like passive range of motion versus active range of motion. So we've kind of developed it over the years, but that's the general kind of battery of testing that we've been doing.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we check trunk rotation too.
Oh,
Right?
yep.
I think we do like
Them
a
too.
seated trunk rotation to, because it's like, okay, we want to see can these athletes have the range of motion and available range to get into the catch position. So we got to know hips and ankles, right? And then it's sweep
Yep.
rowing. So we've got to know like, kind of like in some ways with their current available motion, are they rowing on the appropriate side? Or are they so asymmetrical because they've always rowed on port, they can't rotate to the left anymore? And like for a whole human, maybe that's something we need them to work on, right?
Right.
And to just kind of be able to, I don't feel like we can just like plug it into a spreadsheet and like tell Excel like you're gonna like green, red, yellow, like different parameters, right? We're not there yet. But I feel like
Nope.
yeah, right. And it's like that's a dream, that's a maybe to come soon. But at the same time, I feel like being able to see like, oh, okay, this person can literally only, get um for your recordings, have we done inches or degrees for dorsiflexion? We've done inches or centimeters?
I think we've done inches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So usually between 4 and 5 inches of like bent knee dorsiflexion correlates to like an appropriate range for a rowing stroke, right? So it's like if they're shy of those 4 degrees, or if they have like 5 on one side and 2 on the other, then it's like, okay, cool, we got to do something here so that you don't end up like tweaking your back, hurting your knees, like doing other weird things sort of up the chain to be able to try and get into that catch position. And then it's like we go up
Right.
to the hips. And if they don't have a minimum of 30 degrees of internal rotation, or what do you have, like 120 for hip flexion as your like cutoff,
I think so.
right?
Yep.
So it's like if we're missing some of those, then like, how do we help that? Um, and um, and then we kind of move up the chain even further to the shoulders. And I would say that's the piece that Emily and I still both have a lot of questions of like, what is enough, like what is globally enough strength, and then
Mhm.
what is the appropriate like ratio of like internal to external rotation, or enough strength in scaption, or all those pieces that really come into having like an appropriate rowing shoulder. um but I would say even without knowing
Yep.
that, right, I feel like Emily, you've been able to develop some programs for your athletes who we've been able to sort of like bucket a little bit in the like, okay, your shoulders should be a little bit stronger, or, oh, your range of motion for this thing is not quite adequate, right? And we've talked a lot about like the buy-in of the athletes being like kind of the most important thing here, but why don't you share sort of like what you've tried and what you've seen over the past 4 years, because it's changed.
Yep. So I would say initially just looking at numbers across the board, they're pretty low.
Yeah.
Like obviously a rower athlete and a baseball athlete are going to be very different in what their numbers are going to be projecting. But even keeping that in mind, like the numbers were overall just very low. Um, like some folk hand numbers were in the single digits. And that one is one that I've kind of just honed in on a little bit because I feel like it's the It's kind of the low-hanging fruit. Like we know exactly the exercise to increase this, and if we can increase that and increase shoulder stability, then great, let's do it.
Yeah, like why
So
not? Yeah.
yeah, so that was my overall kind of like plan in making a shoulder stability program for the rowers. It's just the numbers were overall low, and just kind of trying to improve shoulder stability across the board. Um, just to help kind of that connection between the oar handle to the wrist to the elbow to the shoulder to the trunk, and just try to establish a little bit better connection and stability through that kind of access point. Um, and then the program has kind of developed over the years as just trying to get compliance and buy-in from athletes, coaches, and kind of all of the above. It kind of started as just an idea of let's just make a shoulder stability program and give it as an optional thing to do. That didn't work so great because athletes have a lot on their plate. They're in classes, they're going to lift, they're going they have studying to do. Like they have a lot on their plate. And to add one more thing sometimes just doesn't work, no matter how dedicated they are or not. So then we worked it into adding it to practice a couple days a week, just kind of tacking it on as either part of warm up or cool down, or you just got off the water early, so here's your time to do your shoulder stability program, and kind of building it in and giving the athletes specific was more successful. And also having the coaches support it as well, just kind of created a little bit better environment to do it. And then I really tried to kind of sell it to coaches and athletes by kind of doing the preseason testing that we do in September and then retesting around December and showing the improvements in strength. And that kind of really helped me sell the program that, hey, this is important. We're seeing these great improvements. Let's keep doing it. Because you can add a program, but then if there's no like data to support, like, yes, this is actually working, or like, yes, we should keep doing it, then the buy-in just isn't going to be there.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, they just have too many things. So like, why
Yep.
should they try and even spend the 10 minutes, right? You think like, oh, this will just take you 10 minutes. It's like, well, 10 minutes is a lot of time when you already train, potentially twice a day, a lot of days, and you're managing, especially Northeastern has like their co-op program. So like you're
Yep.
managing like going to work, or you're managing a full caseload of courses, or whatever. But I feel like one of the things you did, I forget when you started it, but I feel like one year you were like, so I decided basically these people who kind of like on team average were like sort of below a certain threshold of like shoulder strength when we tested stuff. You're like,
Yep.
I'm really gonna hone in on them and be like, you really, really need this. Or
Yep.
I feel
Yep.
like you looked back at like injury records of like, okay, someone who had like a rib thing or truly an upper extremity thing,
Yep.
right? That it was like, all right, we did typically see that their shoulder strength correlated to it being a little bit lower. So, like, let's just see what happens if we make that a little bit higher and see what happens to these particular
Yep.
injuries for them. And I feel like that's where we've seen like a neat, like, okay, these people that had problems kind of in that part of the chain of their rowing stroke, they buy into this stability program and it makes a difference.
Yep. Yep.
And I would say that's the side that I see too, right? Whether I see somebody, I just meet them when they have a rib stress injury, or I meet them when they have shoulder pain or, wrist, elbow stuff, which, that doesn't happen as often, but it does.
Yep.
Whether I meet them then or whether I'm fortunate enough, like I get to meet athletes sometimes when they're just like, hey, what can I do to be better? Right. And so
Yep.
sometimes
Yep.
I get that, and then we test their shoulder strength, and it's like, okay, your left versus your right side within your own system, you could even that out a little bit, or like kind of as a pattern that, kind of we've generally gotten the feel for. It's like, you could just be stronger here.
Yep.
And, I feel like something I've talked with a lot of athletes recently about in terms of like the importance of that shoulder stability is like, okay, your legs are stupidly strong. You're a rower. You train your lower body all the time, right? Like in the gym, you've increased your leg drive strength by X amount, but like your shoulders still need to stabilize against that increased strength so that
That
you can
force, yeah.
actually get that force from your footboard to the handle to the blade in the water.
Right.
And if you don't add strength there, like you're going to lose something somewhere. Something might get injured in the process. And no matter what, your effort is not translating into the water. So I feel
Yep.
like that's where it's like we need both. And the
Yep.
shoulders
Yep.
are overlooked because it's not like, the stronger your, external rotation strength is, doesn't it's not like proven to correlate to a 2K score, right? And like,
Right.
will that ever
Right.
be the case? Probably not.
Right.
But like, your shoulders being strong and stable definitely matters of how much you can actually use your leg drive.
Yeah. And I
And
feel like that was my kind of biggest success, was those who had the history of rib stress injury. Like, we implemented the shoulder program, and honestly, they had the most buy-in, because if you kind of sell it to them of, this is going to help you potentially prevent these in the future, then they're like, okay, I've had one every single year since I started rowing, or
yeah,
whatever it may be.
right.
Because we know these are kind of chronic things that that generally come back over and over.
Yeah,
um but those were my biggest kind of success cases, of those are the ones that really bought into it.
yeah.
They had significant increases in shoulder strength, and then that year, obviously there's a million and one factors, whether it wasn't as windy that year, or it wasn't as rainy and wet that year, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, or
But they
their
had,
like courses were less stressful and they
right,
just like actually ate a ton of food all the time or like whatever
right.
else to do that. Yeah.
And it's hard to pinpoint exactly what it is, but
Yeah.
those specific cases, like, they didn't have rib pain that season, and I was like, okay, there might be something to this. But then those are the ones that are really bought in, so it's now trying to get everyone else to be like, okay, let's do this, let's
Yeah.
prevent this from happening.
Right.
Because athletes, I feel like, tend to be a little bit more reactive than proactive, and some are really good at being proactive, but they're kind of far and few between.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I feel like that's just natural, right? I feel like even when you've been someone who's had pain in a certain area and you've realized like, oh, this particular like rehab program or whatever really got me out of that pain, but then when you don't feel it anymore, you kind of forget that like those
Just
things
stop.
were helpful. Yeah, I mean,
Yep.
that's just like, I mean, we all do that. So,
Yep.
um, but even, I mean, I feel like one of the times we were talking recently too, you were like, now the people who did your like original bout of stuff are
Yep.
seniors. And
Yep.
so they've been the ones who experience like, okay, I used to struggle with these things, or even just from the standpoint of like being able to have like a really direct and connected catch, right? Like it
Yep.
might not even be
Yep.
an injury thing. It might be more on the performance side that like they can actually just place their blade.
Yep.
And it's not like they're being told to get their shoulders out of their ears or keep their arms straight or whatever other piece as much. And sure, some of that
Right.
just comes from rowing more, but like
Yep.
some of that could be coming from the shoulder stability program. And so I feel like for them to be the leaders on the team now and being able to be like, look, Emily has put her time in here. We've seen that this helps. And like, if she tells you to do
Yep.
it, please do.
Yep.
Um,
And
that,
this year, what I'm trying to do is, like, in the past, I've mainly honed in on those who had history of injury, but now I'm just trying to gather like a sample of about 10 to 15 of them and retest a couple times throughout the year,
yeah,
so that then I have a little bit more data, and then maybe more people are talking like, oh yeah, I retested my strength numbers and I improved by X amount.
yeah,
So maybe it will just create some conversation on the team, and that
yeah,
will help with some buy-in on those who maybe don't per se need it,
right.
but should be doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Or just kind of a like, why not? Right.
Right.
Like if it is built into practice time or it is, if it's kind of just built in and they can understand why they need to like do those movements with like a little bit more intent.
Yep.
Um, like, they're kind of being asked to do it anyway. So just like making sure they were actually doing it properly and getting the benefit out of what it can be. And it's
Yep.
not, it's not all just about shoulder strengths, right? Like I feel like just the data collection we've done and the points of, mobility and stability and all that kind of stuff that you've been able to like see within, your rowers and, even from the like ankle, it's like if they have stiff dorsiflexion, like, okay, cool, let's like throw you some calf stretching or like here's how to work on your actual joint mobility if that's where it's coming from, and
Right.
right? It's like all those pieces really add up to just like having a lower injury rate in your team. So then more people on the water in practice and races and, like they're just like maximizing the potential of everyone, but
Right.
hard to do when you don't get the sport. So that's where
Yep.
it's like, right? It's like props to you for taking the time to learn. And that's really why like your athletes like trust going to you. The number of
Yeah.
like really and truly the number of athletes, like collegiate athletes I get from local colleges and like people who live local so they see me over breaks. Where they're like, yeah, I tried to go to the trainers and they really didn't understand anything of what I was saying. They threw some cups on me and said, hope that helps. Like that's what most rowing athletes are getting when they're going to their training room. And
Yep. Yep.
so the fact that these athletes know, like, oh, if my rib is bothering me, I can talk to Emily, and hopefully they know they need to talk to you like right away, like the first
We're
time
working
they
on
feel
that.
it. Exactly. Um, like that you're going to help them stay in the boat and stay in practice as much as you possibly can, and like you understand
Yep.
what they've got going on so that you can actually do that for them. Rather than like, like being like, oh, I guess you got to bike until this goes away. It's like, well, help me figure out why I have this,
Right. Right.
and, so I think it's really huge for the Northeastern women's program that you've like taken this time and learned everything you have. And, you know, kind of, you can speak their language, right? Which is like
Right.
huge.
Well, and I
And
think that's what's the most helpful is like they see that I've put in time and effort to learn the sport, and
yeah,
they recognize when I understand terms that they're using, or like the catch position or the drive phase. Like I understand what they're talking about.
yeah,
So our conversations and our evaluations and our treatments and things like that can go a little bit more smoothly because they don't have to identify and define every term that they're talking about.
right.
And it's just kind of helped build that trust because and this is with every athlete, if they see that you're putting in the effort to understand them,
Yeah.
then they really appreciate that. And it just kind of helps build that rapport a little bit better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And that's where, it goes really, really far. And it, from a selfish side of things, right? Like for me, it's been huge for me to be able to like understand how to teach somebody the sport and to really see the like productive side of you just truly being able to understand like the athletes that you're working with and the culture of their sport and the mechanics of the stroke and all the bits and pieces people within the rowing world really take for granted, right? Like
Yep.
you tell somebody like, oh yeah, my back hurts every time I put the blade in the water at the catch, and like somebody who doesn't know rowing is gonna be like, I have no idea what you mean other than you told me your back hurts, and
Right.
or the difference of catch-sided back pain and like finish-sided back pain, and the fact that you can
Right.
understand that that's like a flexion pattern versus potentially an extension pattern, and all those
Right.
pieces, right? It just makes it easier on your brain to like be able to
Yep.
figure out like how do I help this person well? And your coaching staff is going to trust when an athlete goes to you that like you're giving them a good answer, right? That's the other side of things.
Right.
A lot of coaches don't trust the athletic training room, so they don't send their athletes. So it's like, then
Yep.
what? And
Yep.
so it becomes really tricky, and truly like what you've done is a really great example of like how far it goes to just be a non-rower who's like learned the sport, right? And
Right. Right.
learned the basics, um and our testing on the side is like bonus
Yep.
and all of that for sure. And it's really I can't imagine within just your solo athletic trainer situation being able to like actually collect all that data on 60 athletes at the beginning of your season, right? Like,
It would have been impossible.
yeah, so like whatever, we'll just keep doing it. But like,
Yep.
that's another challenge it's a lot of athletes. So like how do
Yep.
you get good baseline data, good health screenings, kind of as they come in for their physicals at the beginning of the year or whatever it is, like,
Right.
you
Yeah,
know,
it's hard. It would be almost impossible for me to do it solo,
yeah.
just with the amount of athletes and the time it takes to do it. Like if I spent 20 minutes on each athlete doing
Yeah.
this baseline testing, that's about like 2 weeks
Yeah, it's
of,
like, and that's
and
all you
that's
could
not
do.
doing
Yeah.
anything else. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is really so because yeah, when we do it, we have, let's see, we usually have two PTs testing shoulder strength. We pulled it off with one this year, but we usually have two PTs testing shoulder strength. We usually have you doing hip strength.
Yep.
We usually have another PT doing hip range of motion. We usually ask one of the PT students, we have a champion, to do the dorsiflexion and the trunk range of motion, and then I'm checking everybody's like pelvis motion on an erg.
Yep.
It's a lot of bodies. And then we,
A lot of
luckily,
bodies.
yeah, and then luckily it's like we have other PT students or the coxswains are like good scribes for us so that it's as
Yep.
efficient as it can be.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean that's like ideally that's it's like 10 plus people to like pull off testing. I mean, we get 60 athletes in and out in usually like a 3.5 hour time frame,
Yep.
right? Because we have two
Yep.
waves and they kind of overlap and they come in and out and they're even sitting, they're sitting around a little bit because pieces take longer than others, but
Yep.
um, it's not a small undertaking, but the fact that you've gotten such great like data and injury shifts in your program
Yep.
because of it, right? Like it's worth
Yep.
it. So,
And it's definitely taken years to kind of, I guess, do something with the data. Like
yeah,
I remember our first year we collected the data. I like
yeah.
put it all together in a spreadsheet and I was like, oh my God, what do I do with this?
Yeah, and it's so much. It's like, what if this even matters? And we're like, I guess
Yep.
we'll wait and see.
Yep.
Like, I feel like we tried to run like some statistical analysis on different things to like have a clue, and we're like, well, they just seem like they could be stronger.
Yep. Or
That's really
sometimes
all
it's
we
as
got
simple
out
as
of that
that.
one. And then from there, it's been cool to see. But I do remember, I think it was after the second year we did it. I remember you telling me at one point you guys had a spring regatta. I think it was like in the basin where you were like talking to some other AT or other coach or whatever, and they had like a bunch of people out for injuries by that
Yep.
stage of the season. You're like, and we
Yep.
don't. Like
Yep.
you're like, we're all on the water, we're all racing.
Right.
And
Right.
or maybe you had like two and they had 10 or something
Yep.
crazy. And
Yep.
that was one of those where I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. Like to just have the information and understand like the deficits
Yep.
potentially.
Yep.
And
Well, and
but
I don't have the rowing background, but from learning about the rowing background, like a lot of these athletes, they don't come from a strength and conditioning background. So they've been rowing and rowing and rowing for years
yeah, like
without that
4 to
strength and
6 years before they
conditioning
get to college. Yeah.
background. And in order to sustain and maintain and be able to do that volume of work, like you need that strength foundation.
Right.
And some of these athletes just don't come in with that background,
Yeah,
which is
or
no
if
fault of
they
their own. It's just
yeah.
kind of the way it is.
Yeah, or if they
Um,
lifted in high school, it was in the like rowing coach has programmed things. We're all doing like a team circuit,
yep,
like not necessarily great quality of movement, not necessarily appropriate amounts of weights, like all that kind of stuff like that, and that's where it's like rowing our big teams. Like you can't like coaches try their best. Like there's a reason why certain things happen the way they do, but
yep,
yeah, I mean that's the other side of stuff that we've kind of worked on like
yep,
within your program of like, okay, the strength and conditioning really needs to support this
yep,
how do we give any kind of feedback if feedback is welcome or not
right,
into that system and it does make a really big difference
yep,
um, for sure but
absolutely.
yeah well I feel like this was a super fun first go at the Powerhouse Physio podcast and I'm
Perfect.
sure conversations between you and I will be another part of it down the road because as I've said many times we learn from each other a ton as we kind of
Yep,
are working with our athletes locally and kind of finding trends and learning about whether things matter and all of that but yeah, it's fun, right? Like
it is.
even as a
It's nice to,
non-rower I promise working with rowing is fun, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, it's just nice to have somebody to bounce ideas off of.
Yeah,
And so you're not on an island trying to treat this kind of strange population of athletes.
yeah, we're definitely a unique group, right?
Yep,
Like between the cultural side of rowing and and injury management within that cultural side of rowing of like it's hard to understand the fact that like okay if I show up to practice and I say a piece of my body hurts then seven of my teammates might also not to get to go on the water today and that's a lot of pressure
right, right.
and
Yep,
the trickle down effect of like what it has on the whole team if like somebody's got to sit out and it's not like
yep,
you can say
yep,
like, oh, you can participate in 25% of practice today. Because if they row 8K away from the dock and there's nobody to swap out with, like that doesn't work. So
Right.
the
Right.
logistics of rowing it's really tricky. And so with, the way you would manage injuries in a court or field sport, it's just not the same.
Yep, it's very
Um,
different.
it's very different. And I feel like being able to understand that again just gives more confidence to your team that like you guys can make it through a season as healthy as possible,
Yep.
um, which is pretty cool. But well, yeah, so more to come.
Yeah. This was fun.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna stop. Where is it? There we go.